Yeah, Rachel, I know, is at home with the little ones, making sure
That's
that
right.
they are quiet in the background. Uh, what I want to do is just kind of get to start off. Want to give our listeners a chance to get to know you a little bit and where you're from, why you are doing what you're doing, and how you got to WHQR. And Ben, I'm going to let the ladies go first here. And Rachel, you get to start us off. So give us a little background. Tell us about you. Tell us about what brought you to WHQR. And I know you've been here in Wilmington for quite a while.
Yeah, I've been in Wilmington for close to 10 years now, and I was born and raised in Raleigh, North Carolina. So I'm a North Carolinian. I went to NC State City for undergrad, and I got a swimming scholarship there. So I was there from 2001 to 2005. And then I got a master's degree at NC State as well. I wanted to be a teacher, and I was a teacher for about 7 years, and I was a teacher here at Whqr High School. I had a family, and then I said, hey, let's make a career change. So I went back to school to get my master's of public administration degree at UW. And I was looking for an internship, and this came up on my master's program listserv. And I've been a lifelong NPR lover, so I jumped at it as fast as I could. So I came here as a news fellow in 2017, and I worked with Rachel Lewis Hilburn, who's our former news director. I worked with her on Coastline for about close to 3 years, and I was lucky to join the news team as a full-time employee in last August. So that's me in a nutshell.
And I have a few things I jotted down here. First of all, a swimming scholarship. Tell me about your swimming accolades and your career in the pool.
Yeah, I was in high school, I was a 200 flyer. And then in college, I was a 100 freestyler and a 100 flyer. And I probably had my best year of swimming my year. And I had...
Rachel is frozen. Hopefully she has never frozen in the pool as she does the 100 fly, but Rachel's frozen. But as she was telling us, again, part of our fellows program as well from UNCW got her start there. Rachel, as you're frozen, we're going to come back and ask you a few more questions, but Kelly Kenoyer with the cowboy hat, we were able to get you to cross country from Oregon to make your way here to Wilmington. Welcome to town, and tell us a little bit about you.
Thank you. Yeah, I came out here having never been to North Carolina, not knowing a whole lot about it, but I came here because I really wanted to work in public radio, and it seemed like a great place to do it. My background is that I went to University of Oregon for my undergrad, so I stayed in my home state, where I majored in international studies and in journalism. I also learned Arabic there. And then after a couple of years working for alt weeklies in Oregon, I decided to go back to grad school because I wanted to switch into radio because audio is the best medium. I'm completely convinced, unbiased about this. It's the best medium you can do journalism in. So I decided to go back for that. I also pitched in and learned a little bit of data journalism and some investigative skills while I was in Missouri doing journalism grad program at Mizzou. And then after a short stint at another newspaper in Oregon where I was finishing up my master's degree, I made my way here. And I've been here since April, and I love it. Wilmington is such a cool town. Coming here sight unseen because of the pandemic, I wasn't sure what to expect. I'd never really spent much time in the South, and I've loved it so far. What a cool town, so welcoming.
Well, we must have convinced you pretty good in the interview session for you to come sight unseen to Wilmington from Oregon. So it's great to have you here. One thing that jumps out, not many people have Arabic as, was it a minor? What was that in college?
Yeah, it was my minor. I took 3 years of Arabic. I also studied abroad in Morocco. When I went into school, they said you should pick a language because there was a language requirement that would be useful for journalism. And, you know, we were in a lot of wars in the Middle East at the time, and it became something I was really passionate about on top of everything. So yeah, Arabic, it's a cool language, beautiful language.
Morocco, tell us about Morocco and your stay there.
I stayed with a host family in Fez for a summer, and it was such an interesting place to live. I mean, it's a lot less expensive than the United States, which is nice. Delicious couscous. I was there during Ramadan, so everything was closed during the day. But the host family was really cool. One of the things that stuck out to me the most from living there is how family oriented Moroccans are compared to Americans. I mean, here when you see advertisements, it'll be maybe a guy with a watch or, a woman washing her hair, but almost always it's an entire family with kids in the advertisement. Like that's the ideal. It's not an individual, it's a whole family. So it was definitely an interesting cultural experience, very different from living here.
Now, and I might be totally wrong, but didn't you have an interesting adventure when you first got to Morocco? Wasn't there something strange about your getting there?
Oh man, I don't know if the people at Facebook need to hear about this. But...
Oh, well, and that's okay if you don't want to bring. That's okay. I just remember a story. We'll keep it amongst ourselves then. She had a really cool, interesting experience when she first got there. I'll get you off the hook there. Rachel Keith is back thanks to technology.
Sorry.
Again, no, that's and you know what? For those of you who are listening tonight, who are WHQR listeners, it really brings up the epitome of the last 2 years. We literally have been living on Zoom for a couple of years. We do a lot of our stuff virtually now just because we had to. And so this is what happens sometimes when you have to rely on Wi-Fi and technology. Rachel, I want to get back to you because you mentioned you were a UNCW fellow here at WHQR. I thought that was a really interesting point that you bring up because we have a group of fellows who come through the station. We put them right to work. It is, to me, it's one of the better internship type fellowships that you can get because you really do the work. Did you find that when you were here?
Oh, yeah. I just loved the work. And I mean, I was a full-time producer. I was right in there with Rachel Lewis Hilburn. She gave me a lot of responsibility and leeway. And we had professional discussions and she treated me like a colleague and one of the team. And it was a wonderful experience.
Okay, and again, I want to remind anyone that if you have questions for our news team here tonight, you can go into the chat, type your question in, and I will get that right in front of me, and we'll ask as many questions as we can here tonight. All right, Ben, last but not least, we're going to bring you in from the dark, and you don't have to tell us where you are, but I know it's a closet somewhere because you're dark in there. Ben is our news director and comes to us from Port City Daily. And it's been a little over a year now, Ben. Can you believe that it's been that long?
I cannot. On my 1 year anniversary on October 15th, I stared at the calendar and I flipped back through all the months and I said, okay, I mean, the time has passed, but it feels like I keep telling people that this is still my new job.
All right. So to give us your background, tell us about yourself, how you got here, where you came from, and why you're doing what you're doing.
Sure. So I moved to Wilmington twice. That's how much I like it. I moved here in 2003 after college and worked in the restaurant industry. I moved from here to New York with my wife to go back to school. I was in academics. I was an English professor and moved back down here to finish a dissertation and got a job at Port City Daily while I was working on that. And I pretty much abandoned academics for journalism. I loved it way more than I liked the ivory tower. And I worked there, started as a beat reporter, became a assistant manager, ended up as the manager for a couple of years before I left to come here. And the short version of that is that, conversations with you and our former man wearing all the hats, Doc Jardin. I really think that this is the future of reporting. I think, the marriage of radio and a website and a nonprofit, I think that's one of the very few formats in journalism that has a chance to survive. And so far, I think we're making good on that promise.
Yeah, and you mentioned Doc Jardin. When I got here, he was the interim general manager. We brought him aboard as the interim news director and wearing hats. He wears more hats than Kelly wears. I mean, he really has done a great job with this news team. And Doc is kind of going back into the volunteer world now. So again, we really want to thank Doc Jardin, and I know you would as well, Ben. He's been a great mentor for us.
Absolutely. Yeah. He's, he's the reason I'm here. And he was sort of a confidant and a consultant for me getting getting my bearings in the radio world coming from digital. So I owe him quite a bit, as I think does the station.
Okay, I've got a question for all of you. I'll kind of throw it out there, and I'll just to make it so we're not on top of each other in terms of answering, I'll point it a direction and we'll go that way. Peggy wants to know, how fast do you have to hustle to beat social media news stories? And where do you go first to fact check what you have heard? Rachel, Keith, I'm going to have you jump in first on this question. Yeah, it's a world where a lot of news operations, if they're not first, they're last, is what they think. We are a little bit different on that. We check the facts a lot more than a lot of news outlets. So Rachel, I'll let you jump in with that.
Yeah, I mean, I can speak to, I follow mainly education stories. And so I work with Ben closely. He's built a good network of sources and people that he trusts. And then we do have a good working relationship with the public information officers. So we can go straight to people that we trust, straight to the government sources to see whether or not this is valid. I mean, we had to unfortunately deal with the shooting issues at New Hanover High School. We acted pretty quickly on that. We tried to get the lines coming from Wilmington Police or from the school system itself. So we do try to go those routes that can vet the information for us. And then a lot of times I do go to the school board meeting. So I'm on the ground seeing issues that happen in real time. So I can tell Ben, hey, this is going on, or no, this really isn't an issue here at this time. So it's really important for us, as the pandemic is, well, who knows how long we'll be living with it, but we'll be able to go to more meetings. We'll be able to be there on the ground with the community and see what's going on. So it's really important to, again, trust your government sources, trust the sources that are in the system, trust people who know that can tell you the right information.
And Kelly, you came from a print background, which again, timeliness might not be quite as important because the print might not come out for 24 hours or whatever it may be, unless you were working on an online segment. But to tell us the difference between that and now working in the radio business in terms of social media and getting your facts correct.
Yeah, so I worked in alt weeklies for a couple years, and there we had a pretty significant web presence. So we were kind of in between like a Port City Daily, and if you're familiar with Indie Week in the Triangle area, it's that kind of style of journalism. So that was a case where we would try and hustle to cover breaking news as quickly as possible. I remember I would have to run out to cover a car crash and get to the scene as quickly as possible when we found out about it from social media. And the idea there is you'll see rumors on social media about things, and then we have to go in person to confirm. We don't spread information unless we figure it out firsthand. And then on the other hand, I worked in a newspaper that was very old school. It was a once a week newspaper that was the paper of record in a small town. And that sometimes was very slow. You know, we would be the last to report a story, but sometimes the most accurate. You know, we covered this terrible accident that happened on a lake, and everybody else covered it first, but we had the most detailed version of the story because we took our time with it. And I think that in radio, we kind of benefit from having time and being able to spend time on things, but we also are able to put out really quick briefs. So when we're covering government meetings, sometimes we're able to get a story on the air the very hour that something happens. You know, when I cover the county commission and Rachel's hosting All Things Considered, I can send her a brief and then she can air it 30 minutes after the vote takes place. So we can be pretty quick. And I think that we are very careful to be more accurate than your average rumor mill on Facebook.
And Kelly, I know that we were talking during the interview process to get you here to Wilmington, that part of the job is covering county commissions and school boards. And, you know, a lot of people would say, oh, you know, is that real news? But in Wilmington, it is. I mean, there's a lot going on with all of that. So it's an exciting part of the news coverage here at WHQR.
Yeah, I mean, the sheer amount of money that's floating around in this county and in this city is almost unimaginable. you have $350 million just in the county from the hospital sale, and that's not even getting into the federal money that's come in. So what can be done with that money? It's incredible to imagine. And what is being done with that money is something that we have to hold the city and the county accountable for. So that kind of coverage maybe doesn't sound very sexy, but it's really important, and it really does matter.
All right, I want to bring Ben back in if he's still there. I see the big purple bee there. But Ben, if you're there, I want to talk about collaboration. Just a few days ago, I was able to turn my television on and see Kelly and Ben on television talking about one of the stories that we have here on WHQR. So Ben, talk about partnerships and collaboration and how important that is between news organizations here in Wilmington.
Yeah, I mean, that's crucial if you're going to try and do anything to get ahead of social media. You know, on our magazine shows, we'll pull from reporting by other local news networks, but we really have to trust them. So that's the first part of that partnership. Then the second part is, you know, sharing resources, communications behind the scenes with other journalists. And in the case of what happened this week, you know, WECT just basically trusts us enough and trusts our reporting to have Kelly and I on the show a couple times to explain what was going on. And that does a couple things. One, it helps us be fast when we need to be fast. And it also makes sure that, you know, you've got 3 or 4 news outlets in town, and there's only so many reporters and only so many hours in the day. So if we're all chasing the same story, you know, things are going to fall through the cracks. So those collaborations help us, even though, you know, in certain senses, journalists are competitive. We're also colleagues, so it helps us sort of cover the most ground.
And, you know, Ben, that isn't the case in all markets. I've been in some markets where it is so competitive between the outlets that there's no partnership, there's no collaboration. And I think there's, especially nowadays, there's a very important reason for journalists to be able to collaborate. So, and I don't know how it has been in any markets you were in previous, but this one's a lot different.
This one's a lot different. I think, you know, obviously you know, in a big city, papers are going to go at each other. In New York and Chicago and LA, you see less of it because they're fighting for their lives. One of the things that benefits us is that we don't have a paywall, you know, so we're not living and dying on clicks. What really matters is that the people listening and the people reading get good news. So if WECT has a good report, Report City Daily has a good report, and we run it, we didn't lose any clicks. We didn't lose any advertising capital. We have relationships with those groups, and we trust their reporting, and we can get that information to our listeners, and focus on stuff, you know, that's maybe a bit more in depth. But you're right. That is kind of a precarious balance. Not everyone can do it, especially if you're running a paywall, or you're just going on advertisement that's based on the number of clicks you get. So it's very difficult. It doesn't work anywhere. We're very lucky.
It does, because you were at a place where clicks mattered and there was a paywall. Does it make your journalism different when there is a paywall and you're looking for clicks?
It shouldn't, but the pressure is enormous, and the pressure to do certain kinds of journalism, the pressure to, you know, put up every press release, the pressure to do, you know, cover every restaurant opening, because those get a lot of clicks. So it's not that we did anything unethical. It's, you know, I would happily stand by everything I ever did at Port City Daily, but the pressures to do stuff that people might be more entertained by than informed by is there, and it is an intense pressure. And so the journalism we can do at WHQR, free of that pressure, you know, it's a bit more, we got time to really focus on what we're interested in, and sometimes that means long form projects, sometimes that means, you know, less covered issues, but yeah, being free of that pressure does make a difference.
All right, and just a reminder, if you're listening in, we have 2 ways actually that you can ask questions. One is the chat room, and one is the Q&A, which I just learned about. And so either go to the Q&A or to the chat, ask your questions. Rachel Keith, Ben Schachtman, Kelly Kenoyer from WHQR Public Media. And Rachel, one of the questions that we have is, tell me about one of your favorite stories. Now, when you're doing an education type beat that you are doing, are there any stories that stand out to you that would be a favorite story?
I think that meeting in June when all of those community groups kind of clashed with one another outside of the Board of Ed was a really, and actually we had a summer intern with us, with myself, and it was a really good experience for her to see because there were people there to support middle school students, transgender middle school students playing sports. There were people there against the mask mandate or against the school systems supposedly teaching critical race theory. And I really love this story because I highlighted this group of young people of color talking to this elderly white gentleman, and they were trying to understand one another. And they were having just an example of civil discourse. There are people from very different backgrounds, but they were trying really hard to understand one another. And it didn't get ugly. It was getting tense, but they kept trying. And I just want to cover more stories like that. I want to see groups, even though we're so diametrically opposed right now, just trying to find that common ground. And I want to highlight, if I see it, I want to highlight people are out there trying and they're trying to listen to one another.
And I like the fact that you mentioned you had an intern with you. So a young journalist.
That's right.
Being able to see that. What did they learn and what did you help teach that intern that night?
Well, I said, look at that group. That's where the story is. And so I said, let's go over there. And so I said, you can have the mic and just go over there and ask them some questions, ask them what they're doing here. And they let us in and we said, what's your name? Who are you? Why are you here? And so, I was trying to tell her to look out at the crowd, look who could talk to us, look what would be interesting and who do you want to hear from? So it was really good. And she got in there and I was right there with her, trying to get her to ask those questions that people want to know, like, why are you here? Are you making any progress on this issue that you probably are on opposite sides of?
And we really relish the fact that we are able to bring young journalists here to teach them that. And we have the fellowships through UNCW. We also are now a very new summer internship that a generous listener has decided to help us financially so we can have it again next summer as well. And then the community fellowship that we have, again, a generous listener has funded the community fellow for 3 years. And hopefully beyond. And so we really do think that that's an important part of what we do at WHQR is to bring young journalists here, teach them the ropes, and then send them out into the world and let them spread their wings. Kelly, your favorite story? You haven't been here a lot of time yet, but is there one that you can pick out?
I've had some great stories since I've been here. I really enjoyed covering Wave Transit when there was a lot of discussion about the kind of funding it could get in the future and looking at what that could look like if they do pass this quarter-cent sales tax that's under consideration that could give it significantly more funding, what the big scope of that could be and what it actually has become. So that was a story where there were these big dreams that the manager of Wave had for bus rapid transit lines that would cross the entire city. And it turns out she's probably only going to get a third or less of the total quarter-cent sales tax. And the rest of it's going to go towards other kinds of projects. So it's going to be a lot more limited, but it was a lot of fun to play imagination in that way. And we're looking at maybe doing some of those imaginative thought experiment kind of stories in the future on the newsroom. So stay tuned for that in December. Another story I really enjoyed doing was this mold investigation into the Wilmington Housing Authority that we've done this week. It was a tough story to report, but an important one. And I'm really proud of the work Ben and I have done on that this week. It was a tough lift, but we got it all out there. And it's an important story. And a lot of people have come out of the woodwork to tell us that it's just the tip of the iceberg. So we'll keep on it.
And again, those stories are important to the community as well. Every one of them that both of you brought up. And I want to bring Ben into the conversation now about being a journalist. Kermit used to say it isn't easy being green. Well, it's not easy to be a journalist these days because you're not going to have everybody like what you do. And Ben, as a news director, how do you, skirt that line of making sure that you're doing great journalism, but you're keeping your journalists safe? And it is just such a weird time and a hard time to be a journalist these days.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, who would have thought 20 years ago that a school board meeting would be someplace you would feel like your life might be in danger? But, just recently, Rachel Keith was at a school board meeting, and I popped by to check in, and, the Proud Boys were there. One of them had a pocket knife or a hunting knife of some sort, and the sheriff's deputies asked him to leave. But, you've got a extremist hate group that you're worried about them having weapons at a school board meeting. I mean, that's, so it's a new level. It's another layer on top of all the other things we've had to worry about as journalists in the past. I should say that there are journalists working in far more dangerous regions in the Middle East and, in Sudan and Afghanistan, doing way tougher work than we are. But it is a new, it's weird to have those threats on your radar now, for sure.
And again, as a public media station, I hope that our listeners understand, that it's not an easy job to do what these folks here are doing. And also, it does take funding, to do that. And you can even look nationally, NPR, sending reporters into war zones and, making sure that they're safe and giving them the equipment that they need. And, there are just a lot of things that are going on now in journalism that we didn't have to look at. And I was in commercial journalism 20 years ago, and it was nothing like the folks here have to deal with each and every day. Again, we have our chat room open if you would like to ask a question to our news team here. We also have our Q&A box if you have a question for any of our news team. Kelly Kenoyer, Rachel Keith, and Ben Schachtman are here with us because they want your questions, because they do not want to go to my lightning round. They are dreading the lightning round. So any questions that you have, we'll stall that off as long as absolutely possible. So bring your questions in the chat room or the Q&A if you have any questions for the gang here tonight. Rachel, I know that you don't want to talk a lot about maybe what kind of stories are coming in the future because you don't know sometimes, but is there something that you're working on right now that you can tell the audience that we will be hearing on Whqr coming up shortly?
Yeah, I'm really excited about digging into, once the state budget passes, digging into the education budget. I've already talked to Senator Michael Lee about potentially getting an interview with him quite soon. He's the chair of the Education Committee and a local senator. I would like to reach out to the North Carolina Association of Educators. Hey, what did you think about what eventually was the budget? What are we missing here? Want to talk to how the school system here, what's coming down for the state? What are you looking forward to? And then Kelly mentioned earlier, the school system has gotten a lot of funding, federal relief, COVID relief funding. I believe it's $87 million that they are going to be receiving. So I would like to dig in. Hey, where's all the money going? And actually, if the budget does pass, these teaching assistants, I followed them at the last school board meeting. They want at least the $15 an hour, because right now they're being paid $13, and they're going to get that, I believe, in a year. But does that go far enough? They're asking for at least 17. Would the school system be able to bridge that? So funding for education is where I'd like to go next.
And you have that background as a former teacher. And what did you teach, Rachel?
Yeah, I was an English teacher. I taught 10th, 11th, and 12th. I taught AP language, and that was probably my favorite class. And I like the juniors a lot, the 11th graders. They're super motivated because they're getting into college. They're just excited, and they're still working real hard. Some seniors do, but you know how they can be sometimes. So
You didn't mention the 10th graders at all, so we're just going to forget about them then, right?
Yeah, I did a lot of world literature with them, and that was really fun. I love teaching When Things Fall Apart by Chinua Achebe. I love that book, and we taught that, and it's a pretty heavy book. but I love world literature too. So I just love literature, and that's why I'm obviously I read and write all day for work and talk to people.
And it's great to you have that background. You bring that expertise to the air as well. Kelly, as again you move forward, I know right now you're right in the middle of a series that we are doing. What's in the future for you that you're working on?
Well, long term, I have this story on PFAS that I'm working on. Polyfluorinated chemicals that are in the drinking water in the Cape Fear River. There's a lot going on at the federal level right now from the EPA. They're doing a lot to try and determine exactly how bad these chemicals are. It looks like they might set actual standards, which would be very big news. So I've been following along with all of that closely, and I'm hoping to do an in-depth story about that sometime in the next few months. So yeah, that's a big one that's in the works. Otherwise, you can catch me every other week doing city and county coverage.
And again, a new television star is born. You and Ben were on WECT. What did you learn about television journalism in your short time there at the TV station this past week?
I mean, I know that I like the Whqr office better. No offense to WCT. But yeah, it's very different. I mean, it's a lot more visual focused. When I was in undergrad and in grad school, I was learning a little bit of all of these different media. And I am just not that visually oriented of a person. It's hard for me to think about the B-roll that you play while somebody else is talking, So I like how straightforward radio is by comparison. You're not trying to juggle too many things. And yeah, they actually have kind of an open office plan in there. So I can imagine it's just like Spotlight, where people are shouting over cubicles at each other about breaking news.
Yeah, and actually I was in commercial television. The thing that to me is totally different from what we can do on public radio is the time spent on a story. We literally were giving a story that probably should have taken 10 minutes to explain, giving them a minute 30. And that's what you had. So you weren't able to really give the entirety. So and that's nothing against commercial television, because that's the model. But here we're able to do the investigative pieces a little bit longer and really go into depth. So we'll keep you here on radio. They can have the commercial television. Ben, what's going to happen down the pipe for you? Anything that you can let us know that you're working on, or that the news team will be working on soon?
Yeah, we've got a whole long list of projects. We want to look at this community violence situation that we alluded to earlier, with the county's decided to spend quite a bit of money on this. We have a piece coming out looking at True Colors, the sometimes contentious brewery. We've got pieces coming out on, in the coming weeks. There's a situation going on in Elizabeth City that we need to go up and investigate. It's one of those things where it's a little outside of our coverage area, but it's worth it if we think something big's going on. We've talked to some of the other stations about that. Yeah, there's always just a long list of stuff going on.
All right, I've got a question from our chat room from Beverly. Says that they watch PBS TV news shows most evenings and see journalists in war-torn areas interviewing people who are obviously living in desperate situations. She wonders if the journalists are ever compelled to help people financially because of what they're seeing during a story. Have you been in any similar situation locally where you have either helped people with their personal situations or have wanted to help people with those situations? And Ben, I'll start with you on this question.
Yeah, I mean, I think you can't avoid it. This week was an example of that, where we ran into people who could have used all kinds of help, whether it was a ride or help with kids or a meal. And I think, to a certain extent, you have to draw a certain line, because it'll exhaust you, and you won't, if you can't help everyone, you have to start making triage decisions. It's a tough decision, but you do have to kind of at a certain point pull back from it. I think one thing that I've been able to do in my career that has sort of helped me live with that, because sometimes it feels really lousy, is to connect people with services. So one of the benefits of being a journalist is that people in the nonprofit world and the government world, and you just can't stop reporting to go and spend hours helping one person because there's all these other people who need help. But you can say, hey, I know someone at the county who can help you with this property tax issue, or hey, I actually know a good nonprofit that deals with addiction. And it probably is better, because connecting someone to a pro who really knows how to help someone is probably better than you buying them lunch. And I'm not just saying that to let myself off the hook. That's been my experience.
And Rachel Keith, I'll bring you in on that again. You probably saw and felt situations like that as a teacher. I'm sure that you see students who are in situations like that. I don't want to put words in your mouth, but that has to be one of the toughest professions just because of that.
Yeah, and like Ben said, so many times I'd say, I just need a counselor to help me with this student. I put alone, and I think it's so important when someone's really in crisis and they're in a traumatic situation, you have to engage resources so you can help that person as a team. And so, you feel like you can do your part, this other person can do this part. And so that's why I like covering the school system too, because I know that they're understaffed and there's, issues with morale. And I think it's because sometimes there isn't that support. And I like to shed the light on that, not to call anybody out, but say, hey, here's a hole here. And, we need to look at this because people are really struggling. And if this is important to us, if this is important to this community, we need to understand how this problem is working out. And then I thought too, as a journalist, we're trying to write the story, but we're also listening to them. We're listening to their stories. And I think that is a gift for someone to just have someone hear them, because so many people feel lost and they don't know where to turn. And so they call us and they tell us their story, and we're so grateful for that. But I'm just glad that we get to be good listeners to people in our community.
And Kelly, you are doing an investigative serial piece right now that you are meeting folks who need help. That's got to be rough.
I mean, it definitely can be. And I think that one of the things I keep in mind is it's more ethically dubious to accept help as a journalist than it is to give help. And it definitely depends on the exact situation. I mean, there was a case earlier this week where we had a source who needed to go to, we were trying to go to the same place and she needed a ride to get there. So we gave her the ride. It wasn't a big deal to do that. And it gave us an opportunity to talk to her longer in the car. I don't think that there's an ethical line that's been crossed by doing something like that. It's a little bit different if you're giving away large sums of money to somebody. That's definitely a line. And if you do something like that, I think it's very important to disclose it, because people can form an opinion about your action if you are transparent about it. But obviously, being given these gifts from somebody else is a little bit more dubious. I had a friend who, she actually works in San Jose as a journalist. She had a source hand her more than $1,000 the other day, and she had to bring it to her editors and say, what do I do now? He got in his car and left before I could hand it back to him. And they ended up just having him come to the newsroom and they gave it back. So this kind of thing can happen. And it was unclear whether that was a bribe or what he was trying to get done there. But, you have to be careful about the ethics of those situations. And we always try to be really transparent about that.
Yeah, I think you brought up two great words, almost back to back, ethics and transparency. I mean, it really boils down to those two things. And I'm glad you brought those up. All right, gang, first of all, thanks to everyone who has given us questions. It is time for the lightning round. And I know Rachel and Kelly have been warned about it because Ben went through it once. But the lightning round works like this. I'm going to ask a question and you're going to tell me the first thing that comes to your mind. We're going to give our audience a little bit more of an idea about you and about what makes you tick. So here we go. And we'll go in order. So it'll be Rachel, Kelly, Ben. Okay, that's the order we're going to go in. So Rachel, you are first. Here we go. The lightning round begins now. The time machine takes you back to what age and why?
Probably when I first met my husband. It was really fun that first year. It was like 26. I mean, we knew each other when we were 18, but we weren't dating then. But our first year of dating was so fun.
Okay, beat that, Kelly. What's the age?
Oh, that's so cute. Oh man. I think it would be really interesting to visit the 70s. I mean, I wasn't alive during that time, but it was just such a dynamic time with feminism and the movements that were active at the time, the Black Panthers. I think living through a portion of that history would be really fascinating.
Okay, you're way too young because I did grow up in the 70s. All right, Ben, you're up.
Kelly stole mine. I was going to say Lower East Side of New York in 1975.
Okay.
Okay, there you go. All right, Rachel, how many of the 50 states have you visited?
Oh. 2/3. I've been to a lot with swimming. Swim meets are all around the country. So I've been to a lot of them.
Kelly?
I think last time I counted, it was around 17. It might be more now since I've moved further east now, but most of them are out west. So it's the big states, a lot fewer of the little states up in the Northeast.
All right, Ben?
Yeah, my numbers aren't great. It's probably 12 at best.
I'm surprised that I'm at 50. I've been to all 50 states.
Wow.
I thought at least one of you would have, hit the 50 mark as well, but not even close.
You got them already.
Yeah, I'm old too. I mean, I've had age to help me with that. All right. Lightning round continues. Stranded on an island. Which non-family member would you want stranded with you, Rachel Keith?
My best friend, Emily.
Okay. Kelly?
Well, probably my boyfriend, or if not him, my best friend, Emily.
Okay,
Yay!
Ben, how about, is your best friend Emily on the island too? Ben?
Sorry, you froze for a second. That's a good one. For years I would have said Anthony Bourdain, but unfortunately that's no longer possible. But that's still my answer. Screw it.
Okay, that's a good one. All right, Rachel Keith, cats or dogs?
Dogs.
Kelly Kenoyer?
Absolutely dogs. Mine's on the ground right here.
Ben?
You got to know that my cat is staring at me.
All right, what
So,
we have to have names here. Rachel, dog's name?
Oh, my babies passed away this year, but it was Ruby and Renee. They were two big bloodhounds.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Kelly?
No, it's okay.
My dog's name is Misty.
Okay. Ben?
And Glory the cat, who hopefully will let me back in because I said cats and not dogs.
Gotcha. All right. Lightning round continues. Rachel, Prince or Queen?
Oh, Queen.
Kelly?
I'm also a big fan of Queen.
Ben?
I know he was apparently a real jerk to work with, but Prince.
And you all went for the musician one, not the royalty part of question, whether you like princes or queens. So good for you. I like that. Rachel, Star Wars or Star Trek?
Star Wars.
Kelly?
Oh, I'm absolutely a Trekkie. Absolutely.
Live long and prosper. Ben?
I mean, I had like the manual for the Enterprise D when I was growing up, so Trekkie.
Okay. Rachel, all-time favorite movie?
Oh gosh, Kurt. I do love The Color Purple.
Okay. Kelly?
Oh, this is so hard. My favorite growing up was Spirited Away.
All right. Ben?
It's a tie. Cool Hand Luke or Catch-22.
Cool Hand Luke. I got some quotes from that, but we'll stay away from that right now. Kelly, surf or turf?
Me?
Yeah.
Surf. I grew up, my
Rachel.
family's from Alaska, so salmon.
Okay. Rachel, surf or turf?
Surf.
Ben, surf or turf?
Surf.
Ah, man, I'm a turf guy, man. Give me the beef.
I spent 3 years working at a restaurant that served literally nothing but London broil on sandwiches. I've eaten enough red meat to kill 1,000 men. So surf.
All right. I promise you we're winding this down here for all of you who are still there with us. I'm enjoying this to know a little bit more about myself. Your most embarrassing Halloween costume you've ever worn? Rachel Keith.
You remember Matt Foley van down by the river?
Yeah. That was you. Nice.
That was me.
Kelly.
Oh man. I mean, I think I literally as a kid dressed up as a sheet ghost. Like I just had a sheet over my head. So that was pretty embarrassing.
Ben.
When I was a kid, I decided I wanted to go as homeless, and my parents let me do that for some reason. which is just horrifying. Like they should have stopped me. I was like 6, but they didn't. So that's pretty bad.
That is pretty bad. You take the cake on that one.
I'm
All
still
right.
sorry for that. I'm still sorry.
You're gonna get canceled, Ben. You're gonna get canceled.
I deserve it. That's the thing. My parents canceled too. It's my only request.
All right. 2 left. Rachel, Los Angeles or New York City?
New York City.
Kelly, Los Angeles or New York City?
I haven't spent a lot of time in either of them, but I've got to say New York City because it's got better public transit.
All right. Ben, LA
I can't-
or NYC?
I can't say what I want to say about LA, but NYC.
Okay. Okay. The very last question of the night. This is the last of the lightning round, the last of the night. Which of the 7 dwarfs would you be? Rachel Keith.
Sleepy.
Kelly Kenoyer.
I think I'm grumpy.
And Ben Schachtman.
Can I also be grumpy? Because I'm
You
grumpy.
can.
All right.
All right. You guys did well. And on that note, with the 7 dwarfs, I have to say happy birthday to Mickey Mouse and Minnie Mouse. They are 93 years old today. Yeah.
Oh my God.
Hey.
Congratulations.
All right. Well, that's it. You guys survived the lightning round. You survived the Ask the Newsroom. Thank you so much to everybody who joined us tonight. Thanks for the questions. And again, we can't do it without your support. Your financial support helps WHQR do what we do in the newsroom. So again, we would like to say thank you to everyone who does support us. And if you would like to support us more, just give us a call. We would love to have you become a member. Ben and Rachel and Kelly, thank you so much. Great job. Continued great work from all of you. Have a great night. And everyone, good night and thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, thanks.